Okay, we're ready to go with watercolor washes now. Watercolor washes are used basically to do backgrounds, but can be used for many things. A background, a sky, or let's say the ocean, has to have one or two basic colors that are sweeping across the entire sky. And to do that seamlessly, so that you don't have streaks, you should use a lot of water. The secret to having the color blend smoothly and to making gradated colors blend together where they meet is to have the paper wet before you start applying paint. To do this wet paper process, you just have to be near a sink. You have to have some tape, masking tape, to tape down the edges. And you have to have your watercolor paper right side up. What is the right side? The right side is where you can see the manufacturer of the watercolor paper's name. And on the corner of the sheet, in most cases, you can see the name of the manufacturer. In this case, it's Arches. To give you an idea of the right side of the paper, here is one that's been painted already, and you can see the name of the paper manufacturer, in this case Arches, is right here stamped on the corner. When you can see the name or the watermark on the watercolor paper, you know that you're using the correct side of the paper. Here is our paper. We've used the right side up. So because we have the right side up, we know what side we're going to be putting on the up side of the board. We just simply need to get some water, run the water on the paper so that it's completely covered on both sides, making sure that there aren't any little white spaces left. And notice, I'm not taking my time, because we don't want to get too much water on this paper over a long period of time. To do that would be counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish. So now that we have what we believe to be a fully saturated paper, we're ready to put it down on the board. We're going to let it drip for just a few minutes because that's okay. And we don't want to have water pooling, and so we let it drip. Then we put the paper flat on the board, as close to the center as we can, leaving room on all sides for the tape. And we can use either a paper towel to smooth it out a little bit so that we don't have a lot of ridges. But ridges will come very, very soon, so we've got to get the tape put down quickly, half on and half off this board. So half on the paper, half off the paper. Notice I am not spending a lot of time to measure. I'm not spending a lot of time to be totally accurate and straight, because I can see that already the paper is beginning to have ridges. And that is not something to be concerned about, because that will change as this paper dries. Now, not using my hands, which might have oil on them, body oil, I'm using some paper towel just to put this down. Even though you might see some ridges to begin with, once this has dried, the ridges will disappear and it will be tight like a drum. This is called stretching the watercolor paper. And here's where we begin when we apply a wash for a sky and for a large background like an ocean. Starting with the sky, you can apply any kind of rubber cement or liquid masking first and let that dry. When it's completely dry, then you can start with your water. We'll see a little bit more about that later. But here's my brush. As you recall, big wide brush for this. Starting with clean water and a nice smooth watercolor paper that's dry. As you recall, we had ripples when we were making this watercolor paper wet to stretch it. It's hard to believe that these ripples will stretch and become a nice smooth watercolor surface like what you see here. But now we're going to get it wet again. We've already put our sketch on, and notice again, I'm working fairly rapidly. It would be nice to take your time, do this when you felt good, but with watercolor, you are against the clock because it will dry. I've already squeezed out my paint. You can see that here. And now I'm going to go ahead, use a little bit from ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, sometimes a little yellow. Make sure I don't have too much on my brush. Use a sponge to take some off if I need to, and apply it in the sky area. And work my way down. And as you can see, as I work my way down, the color is going to be less and less vibrant, which is the plan. A wet sponge can take off a little bit, but of course this is where dry color will be, so we don't worry too much about that. If you realize that you needed to have a little bit more color, and you can see on here we probably could use a little bit more color, you can go ahead and put some more color on your brush. Draw it down from the top, going down again, making even strokes back and forth. And we're now going on 2 minutes. And in 2 minutes, you should be fairly done with your nice even sky wash, which has gradiated down to less and less color at the bottom. If you rework this a lot, what will happen is the paper will begin to get roughed up, and when the paper gets roughed up, you'll notice blotches of deep color blue that you don't really want. So going from dark to light, you've done all you can do for right now. Now, for the ocean, we have to mix a little bit of the yellow that we have put here with the blue. And cobalt blue is good for skies. Cobalt blue and ultramarine blue, they're good for the sky. But when we get down to the ocean, we need a little bit of yellow, and we could use cerulean blue as a color for the ocean. You can see there is a little bit more of a green in the ocean, and so we can start mixing our color for the ocean. And because our water is a little bit blue here, it won't matter because the ocean will have some blue color as well. So once again, we will apply the water to make sure our paper is saturated and easy to blend. Now, once we have the water, already having mixed the paint together, we can apply the paint in a fashion that will help us to blend the ocean colors the same way that we blended the sky colors, adding a little more this time for shading. And here's what I mean by shading. On this reference photo, I see that there are shadows in here. And so I'm going to apply a little bit more paint so that we have that shadow blending. And as you can see, it's going to blend into the rest of this basic ocean area. And don't worry about some streaks because the ocean's going to be a little different than the sky. It's going to have some streaks as part of it. You can see the streaks on this picture here, this reference image. So I'm going to work lightly now. Notice I've changed brushes. I'm using this smaller brush now. And I'm applying some streaks where I see them, and I'm just putting some in that will give us the ocean wave feel. Darkening it where it needs to be dark along the edge. And this shadow that you see me pointing to helps us to have some depth to the water in the distance. And it won't take much time before you're finished with this section. Reason being, you'll notice that those little ripples are starting again, and your object of this particular part is to keep the ripples at a minimum until you're finished. And that is how to blend colors from dark to light on the ocean.